Hi everybody and welcome to my First 5 Years Instagram Live. I'm Alistair Bryce-Clegg, one of the co-founders of my First 5 Years.
And I'm Jenny Johnson. Welcome. So today we're talking about raising confident children. And as a mum of 3, I have to say this is one of the things that really concerns me the most. There's just so much that goes on in children's lives to knock their confidence, and with social media these days, having 3 older girls is quite a scary place to be.
Yeah.
So the more confident I can help them be, and the more confident we can all help them be, I think it's a really, really important life skill. So we're looking obviously in the 0 to 5 space. That's what my First 5 Years specialises in, and that's where our focus will be today. But maybe we could just start with exploring what a confident child looks like in that space.
Okay, I think in terms of self-confidence, you've got to have self-awareness before you develop that into self-confidence. So obviously babies, well, you could argue babies are born very self-confident because they just know what they know. But also as we raise children, our own levels of self-confidence, as with lots of things around parenting, subconsciously kind of leak out and rub off on our children. So things we say, things we don't say, the way we respond to situations as adults also give repeated messages to our children. So what we're looking at really is when children are first born and as they begin to grow in those very early stages of development, it's about children having awareness of who they are. In fact, initially it's about children becoming aware that they're a separate entity from their caregiver, usually their mother. And then children go through a phase where they actually realise that they are their own physical entity. So there's an often quoted mirror test where children can look in a mirror and not realise that the person in the mirror is them. They think it's another child looking back at them. Mm-hmm. And then you begin to become aware, usually when you've got a kind of command of initial language, around the feelings of others and how that impacts on how you feel about yourself. So a lot of how we develop confidence is linked to how we feel about ourselves, but also how we perceive others and how they feel.
It is just so true that, you know, when you bring your child home for that first time, we're not given a manual, we don't know what we're doing, and we bring home these perfect babies. And then I do think sometimes as parents it's things we do along the way that knock their confidence as opposed to build their confidence. And a question we had in was whether children are born with confidence.
Well, you're born with the potential to develop confidence. So yes, it's all there. Confidence is how you feel about yourself. And how you feel about yourself is a lot to do with how other people make you feel about yourself. So it's that fine balance again as a parent between making children feel like they can, but also being aware that it's positive. It's a positive thing to fail. It's a positive thing to get it wrong. And how we give children resilience strategies to come back from when things don't go the way we expect them to. So a lot of being confident is also about being resilient, so that when things happen or things are said or things occur, that you've got the resilience to be able to put that in the correct terms, to define it, to put it in the box that it belongs in and move on, and not sit and dwell on that feeling of inadequacy or that feeling of shame that came out of something not going right.
So giving our children space to fail is really quite a key part of building their confidence.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be life failure. Failure as in, I'm trying to stick 2 things together and they won't stick, and why won't they stick? Or I'm trying to fit this onto this or build this model or make this thing and it doesn't work. And so they are the kind of day-to-day failures that then we say, well, when that happens, maybe we could think about doing this, or when that happens to me and I feel like that, this is the strategy that I use. So we start to build those early building blocks around resilience that mean when a child comes up against something that doesn't go the way they expected or doesn't work out, they're not suddenly floundering thinking, oh no, it's all gone wrong. They think, oh no, when things like this happen, this is what you can do, I'm going to try this. And you've already got that air of confidence that comes from strategy.
So not born with confidence that's sort of ready-made, but born with that potential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So what are the common things we as parents do that could knock a child's confidence? Because I think, we all have absolutely the best intentions, but sometimes the language we use or things that we say or do are probably the reasons that
Yeah.
children are less confident than they have the potential to be.
We talk a lot in my first 5 years about the concept of realistic parenting. So this idea that we are not Instagram parents that are perfect all of the time. And you will, as a parent, say and do things regularly that you reflect on and think, well, maybe that wasn't the best thing to say, or maybe that wasn't the best way to approach it. So there are things that we acknowledge ourselves as parents that are not the way we'd ideally want to parent, but circumstance made that happen. And again, we've talked before in our Instagram lives about how when you can fall out with your child, or when you can have a disagreement, or when even you can become angry with your child, and then you go back and revisit that and say, look, that wasn't how I should have responded, that wasn't how I want to respond, I want to reassure you that I still love you, but sometimes, as a human being, these things happen. That reparation can give your child really important skills, and skills that they need in life, which they wouldn't have if they lived in this perfect existence. But also the idea that the more we do for children, the less they learn. So to enable children to build their confidence, you have to let them try, even when your hands are itching to do it for them. I watched a video of a baby on a mat trying to reach a toy, and they're on their tummy but they're not crawling, and they're using this kind of lumbering across the mat body movement to try and get where they are, and it went on for maybe 9 or 10 minutes, which felt painful. And everybody who watched the video in the room was like, if that had been my child, I would have just reached out and got the toy and plonked it in front of them, because clearly they're struggling to get there. But they got there in the end and they achieved it. And even though that was a baby, that was the beginnings of that kind of building the resilience, building the curiosity, building the aptitude, that when you do lots and lots of that, that will feed into them becoming confident. But even down to things that we all do as parents. I mean, like when your child has created a wonderful masterpiece, and the first question you ask them with a big smile on your face is, oh, that's lovely, what is it? And the fact that you've said, what is it, lets the child know that what they've created that was in their mind's eye or in their vision can't be interpreted by the person they want to impress most. So even little things like when a child brings you whatever they've created and you say, oh, I love that, tell me about how you made it. Talk to me about your favourite bit. I really love this bit. How did you make that? Tell me more about this bit. And then what you're trying to do is tease out. And usually through what they tell you, you'll then get a sense of kind of what it is. But sometimes just that, when you say things like, well, what is it? You don't mean that as a really negative statement for your child, but it can be one of the small seeds planted that can knock their confidence.
I think somebody's having their bins collected. That's somebody's bottle bank.
It's a very big bottle bank, if you heard that.
That's not us. It's not our bottle bank. There's always something goes on when we're having a live. That just made me smile. So when we see a child's confidence has been knocked, and sometimes it's completely out of our control. So my youngest plays football and she regularly has her confidence knocked, and you can see it as a parent and you want to do what you can to restore and help them build that back. What can we do in the moment, and what can we do just more generally that our children are ready for these knocks? Because we can't protect them from them. They've got to be ready for them.
And it's really tough, and especially as children begin to go through kind of preschool, school, and then you are learning that kind of power struggle that children have about who's in control, who isn't in control, and you will get children who are not particularly pleasant to each other. And it's not because they're necessarily a horrible child. Sometimes that's due to a lack of confidence. So if I don't feel particularly confident and somebody is threatening my status, even if that's a subconscious feeling, what I will do is go on the counter-attack. So you can't sit here, you're not my friend, you're not invited to my birthday party. And that carries on all the way through. I mean, even with my 3 boys who are young adults now, I can remember in their late teens them being really bothered because they might not have been invited by a key person to a key event. And of course, as an adult, they'll have forgotten about that in 6 months' time, but at the time it's really painful. So what we can't do is take away that moment. We can't legislate how other people will interact with us or our children. But again, we go back to the resilience bit, where you acknowledge children's feelings and say, I know how bad this feels right now, and that's because, and when I feel like that, this is what I do. Because sometimes saying this will pass and in 6 months' time it won't be important to you. It doesn't help.
Doesn't help in the moment.
But by saying, I acknowledge that you are feeling really fed up about this, you will feel this feeling again lots of times through your life, but let's just talk about it in context. Let me try and relate it to something. I am not you. The big mistake you always use with the teenager to say, well, and they're like, well, you're not me, are you? But that idea, I'm not you, but let's put it in context and try and talk about those resilience strategies. So I can't take away the fact it hurts, but what I can do is give you some reassurance, some support, and some strategies for when it happens next time.
Some of these moments that happen to children genuinely are a learning moment for them. They don't see it like that in the time, but when they look back.
As a parent, it is heartbreaking when it's your little precious bundle of joy that somebody else has been mean to. But also learning that kind of relationship failure and the reparation of that or not are really important life lessons.
It's that reparation we talked about as well, when it is a parent-child interaction that's happened, one that you might not have, on reflection, been that happy with. There's a chance, even later in life, when children remind you of them when they're adults and look back, there's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have that with our adult children now. We had a question come in. What is the difference between raising a confident child and supporting a child's naturally reserved temperament?
So I think it's important to make a difference between confidence and shyness, because they're not the same thing and they're not mutually exclusive. You can get people who are shy in a social situation who might be very confident in their ability to do a job, or their ability to be a good friend, or their ability to, so there are lots of different areas that you can have confidence in, and it's not all about your ability to be able to stand up and appear to be very confident in a social situation. And you'll also get people who appear to be extremely confident in social situations who are also actually painfully shy and lack confidence when it comes to other aspects of their life. So the two are not mutually exclusive. And I think when we are working with children that find some situations difficult, and shyness is usually linked to social situations, it's about looking for the other things that those children can do that they are really successful in and massively celebrating those. Also accepting, and I think we are getting better at this as a society, that not everybody has to be the kind of extrovert all of the time. It's okay not to feel like doing this and this. It's okay as a child not to enjoy a party. It's okay as a child to feel a little anxious in a large social situation. And you can tackle that separately and put in place things that support children, again with strategies, but also let them know that it's okay. If you don't feel like doing that, nobody's going to force you to do it.
Yeah, and I think as an adult and as a child, it's impossible that somebody's going to be confident in every situation. Absolutely. So, I'm confident to speak up in front of a room, but if you put me on a football field or in a sports game situation or a team sports situation, I wouldn't be confident at all. So, there's going to be areas we can celebrate for every child, but we can't expect them to be brilliant at absolutely everything. It's not realistic again.
Yeah, and also we can't make assumptions about what is confidence and what isn't. So sometimes a lack of confidence comes across as overconfidence, because children who might get into a state of anxiety, and adults exactly the same, who become anxious in social situations, overcompensate, and people are like, oh, they're a bit cocky, and actually it's often from a place of insecurity, because if you were really supremely confident about the situation, your abilities within that situation, then you wouldn't need to overcompensate, you would just take it in your stride. So it's subtle and it's complex, and I think we need to acknowledge that it's subtle and complex and do the best we can in the moments that arise.
So that kind of leads on to another question that was pre-submitted, which was, how do I support my child to be confident without them being, well, they've used the word without, but not cocky. That's their words. Yeah,
and I think it's an interesting word to use. So it depends what you mean by cocky and how it kind of articulates itself. So
I wonder if that word translates internationally.
Yeah, so cocky just really means overconfident or too confident. So it's sometimes, often with cockiness, it begins to appear uncomfortable to other people because somebody is going above and beyond a level of acceptable confidence and self-assurance. And again, I do think a lot of that will come from a lack of confidence or insecurity, but also it depends on the situation. So sometimes you might have a child, for example, who's got a lot of knowledge about something that they want to share. And because they've got a lot of knowledge and they've got an opportunity to share it, they share it all, and they share it all in the moment, because what they don't have is the self-regulation to think, well, actually, say I'm at school and there are 30 other children who are waiting their turn. I just need to share everything I've got to say because, children are very egocentric at that age and it's all about them. So that could come over as being overconfident and over-exuberant, but actually it's just about a child wanting to relay what it is they've got to say. But I think often in play situations, you'll see some children who demonstrate that kind of cockiness or overconfidence. But that's usually because they're experimenting with that kind of power interaction, but also from a fear that somebody else will take away their play opportunity or be better at it than they are. So to stop that from happening, they just ramp it all up by 3 years, and therefore that's where that kind of overconfidence comes from. So if you've got a child who appears to be cocky or overconfident, what I would do is try and unpick that and assume it's coming from a place of lack of confidence, and actually spend way more time reassuring than trying to. It's common, especially in the UK, that we talk about like knocking the corners off or knocking somebody down. If they show a lot of confidence, they need putting in their place. And actually by doing that, what you're doing is further undermining their lack of confidence. So I wouldn't try and put them in their place. I wouldn't chastise them. What I do is think, that's interesting. How about we work on really building your core levels of confidence and reassurance, and that hopefully will take away some of that need to overcompensate.
Yeah, and I think bearing in mind again our core space being that 0 to 5 year old space, to have that self-regulation, to realise I'm overcompensating for my own lack of confidence. A child is not going to have that. So for a parent to think the solution is to sort of knock the corners off, so to speak, it's not going to be the right way to go to boost and build their confidence, because the more confident you are, the less you need to be showy about it, I think is what we're trying to say.
If you've got a child going into a play situation and they're suddenly like, whoa, and I'm in the play and it's all going on, again, the temptation as a parent is to squash that and close it down, mainly from your embarrassment, usually of your child's behaviour. And you're going to feel that moment. I think sometimes as a parent you have to learn, and it's really hard, or it was for me, to sit with that discomfort, because you want to make it better and you want to stop what you're perceiving as being kind of antisocial behaviour, and also that subconscious worry that it reflects on you as a parent. Look how their child is behaving, they mustn't be a very good parent. But actually what you'll need to try and do is to acknowledge what's taking place and then try and unpick it and reflect on it and think, right, well, actually, rather than squash it and close it down, I need to see what the trigger is and then hopefully work on that trigger to support that development.
So kind of leads into another question that we had submitted on our Instagram, which was, how can I be careful not to stifle confidence? It kind of follows on a bit from that, I think.
Yeah, and it's this tricky balance that we're never all going to get right all of the time, and also to beat yourself up if you feel like you haven't got it right. Because if you feel like you haven't, it means you're thinking about it, which is very different from just having a pattern of parenting that you don't step outside of or reflect on, you just carry on doing what you're doing. So I think it's also about finding moments where, when children do things that aren't necessarily correct, especially if it comes to key skills that they're learning, like talking, reading, writing, or even things like potty training, weaning, that sort of stuff, to try and make it less of a yes-no situation, or a correcting in the moment. Obviously, if it's going to risk health, and wellness, correct in the moment. But if you can celebrate the effort rather than the outcome, if you can celebrate the curiosity, if you can celebrate the resilience, if you can celebrate those positives, and think, well, okay, that's not how you write the letter A, but this wasn't the moment to say, well, that's lovely, but actually that's not how you're doing A. Because the it's lovely moment then gets completely destroyed by the but. Even if you say it really nicely, you're still actually kind of taking away that child's building of the confidence. So what you're thinking is, that's amazing, you've done that, fantastic, let's celebrate that. I've clocked that, so I'm going to come back in at a later date with some kind of teachable moment as a parent where I'm going to address that issue but I'm going to come at it fresh, and I'm going to come at it as a, right, I tell you what we can do, we can have a think about, or let's get some dough out, or let's get some marbles out in this particular, example, and tackle it that way. So trying to celebrate the dispositions for learning as opposed to the actual, minutiae really helps to develop that confidence.
I think one of the reasons that we talk a lot about creativity and allowing children to genuinely have their own creativity celebrated kind of links into all this, doesn't it? And there's just such a the Instagram is just awash with lots of artwork that parents are clearly doing for their children, instead of allowing the children to do it themselves and to express themselves. And we've got this little mantra that if you do it for them, you're basically just showing a child that you're better at it than they are. So let's just unpick just a little bit that sort of, we call it production line artwork, where we're expecting an outcome at the end because we've been on an Instagram account and it's shown as a Easter chick or a Christmas card or whatever it might be, and it looks perfect, and even the handprint's perfect, and we know if you let a child do their own handprint, it never looks like a handprint because it's always squished. So some of those messages, because I think parents do, or often parents do lots of crafty activities with the children that might be inspired by Instagram, and how that can link to confidence depending on the way that they go about it, the goods and the bads.
So again, this could be an Instagram.
I know, it's very unfair of me.
So basically, there is an argument that would say, well, if I am sitting with my child having a positive interaction, even if we're making something that's very production line, there are some positives around that lovely interaction we're having, the time we're spending together, the language that we're using, and all of those things are truths. But also fundamentally, what you are doing by saying, this is what we're going to make, this is what we're going to make it out of, and this is what it's going to look like in the end, is when it comes to that strand. So if you think about all the different threads of that interaction, so there would be the language, the personal social, the interaction, the feeling of security, the interest, the self-worth, all these lovely strands. And then you've got the creativity, which would be one of them. So yes, you would have all of those strands in existence, but you would be undermining or untwining the creativity one, because even though you've had a positive interaction, and even though there are loads of lovely things that have come out of that space in time, and even though you are creating something at the end that you're then going to go and give to Granny or whoever, Ethel next door, that you are very proud of, what you are giving as a very strong subconscious message to children is that I, as a key adult, as a significant adult, I give you a strong sense of approval when we create something that's very much to my agenda. So what we can do to kind of try and dispel those myths and create that thread of creativity is to, again, hopefully have the same shared time together, but use more ambiguous resources. And they can be literally things that you find in your recycling bin, things that you find around the house. It doesn't have to be going out and buying expensive creative art resources. But the fact that you will talk about what you might make, how you might make it, the process that might be involved, and you would take great pride in celebrating all of the steps that your child put in place. So what they've chosen, how they're managing the scissors, what colours they've selected, why they've done that. And what you'll end up with is something that to an adult eye might look completely random and will not look like the beautiful thing on Instagram. But again, it's about us re-educating ourselves as parents and our families that when you go to grandma's and it's her birthday and you hand over this slightly crumpled, soggy thing, that grandma is like, suddenly her lens shifts and she goes, oh my goodness, you made that by yourself. You did that. I love that. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. Rather than when you give the beautiful kind of Easter card to Granny that you've made via all the cutouts with the parent coaching, and she goes, oh, I love this. This is gorgeous. It is, but what you're also saying to that child is, here's another top line approval from a significant adult around this manufactured product. So there are lots of positives, but the subconscious that you're giving those children is, to get that level of approval, I need to create things that are more kind of outcome driven than process driven. And what we want to try and do to build confidence is to say, right, we can look at all these things for inspiration, but this is where we're going to start with you, your choice, your resources. I'm going to coach you through that but then we get all the lovely threads that we would from doing that kind of activity pack activity, but with a whole added element of creativity and self-confidence.
Yeah, and maybe it's worth WhatsApping Granny and letting her know you're on the way.
Well, the whole
with a card that might not look as they're expecting, and could she just pull off some amazing acting to say how beautiful she thinks it is?
And I think the whole premise of my first 5 years is that we want to reframe parenting for some parents. Certainly wasn't the way that I was parented, but also we're reframing parenting for the people who parented us, who are the grandmas and the grandpas and the nanas. And it's about saying to them, you know, this is why we do this and this is where the value is. So it's about trying to coach them through the process of celebrating the child and get them out of that mindset of, if it doesn't look pretty, it doesn't carry value.
Yeah, we've just had someone say such an important message, wish this was more widely understood. And we get that issue about it not being widely understood. This is why we're doing what we're doing, because we want it to be widely understood.
What we really don't want to do is to say to anybody that enjoys that kind of interaction with their children around that creativity is that you're doing a bad thing. But what we're trying to do is to say that actually you can take all the positives that will give you and we can add you more positives. And what you're doing, your intent is certainly not a bad intent, it's a positive intent. Yeah. But actually there are elements of it that will be giving clear messages to children, whether that's consciously or subconsciously.
No, and I, got 3 children, 2 of them are older. I didn't know this stuff when I was doing activities like this with them. So it was very outcome driven or output driven. And with the third, I really understood the value. And do you know what? It was so much easier for me as mum as well. Yeah. But it's just a penny drop moment for me. Of course, if we celebrate what children are really doing, we're going to give them more confidence. And it's only creativity is just a small thread of confidence, but I just think it's something widely understood by parents and that they often do a lot of, so few little changes.
When we did our live about the balance bikes, and we talked about the fact that if you actually start with a balance bike and move on to a 2-wheel bike and miss out the stabilisers put on by parents to help children actually take away their confidence and also a lot of their physicality in terms of being able to balance and orientation and that kind of stuff. So again, a lot of what we do as parents, we do because it's how we understood that parenting is and also how we were parented, which is the joy of things like my first 5 years and the research that's available that actually is challenging some of the things that we believed to be positives and just giving us alternative ideas that are linked to science and research.
Yeah, and often easier as well, which
often
is
easier.
A win-win.
Yeah.
Right, we've had another one come through on the live which says, how can you move a child along in their learning without knocking confidence?
Well, I think the role of the adult when you're moving a child along in their learning, and often, again, I'm going to talk about a lot about this in my first 5 years, and certainly we do through the kind of streams of learning. As adults, when we think about what we see as really important milestones, especially around academic attainment, so reading, writing, talking, that kind of stuff, then we often are pushing children towards milestones that we understand and recognise, but they're way too far ahead from where they are in the journey. So a lot of what we talk about in my first 5 years is how you develop the things that underpin being a reader, being a writer, being a talker. And now as parents, once you understand what the building blocks are, you can really invest in those and celebrate those. Because often where children's confidence is knocked is because really well-meaning parents who want the very best for their children are investing time and money and effort in them, are pitching a little bit too high on the journey. Aspirational, one for your children is not a bad thing, but in terms of how children learn, there are really clear paths of how children develop these key skills. Mm-hmm. And so often we knock their confidence by trying to move them forward too quickly. So there is knowledge that you acquire, which are the things that you know, but there are also dispositions for learning. So dispositions are basically attitudes too. So like curiosity is a disposition and resilience is a disposition. So as a parent, you can work really hard on how your child feels about learning and how your child feels about reading and writing, because how you feel as a learner is way more impactful than anything you'll ever learn. Because if you don't feel confident, if you don't feel motivated, if you don't feel curious, then you're not going to put any of those things in place. You will just spend your entire time avoiding them which is what a lot of children do in the 0 to 5 space.
Yeah.
This, you know as a parent when you say, oh, how about, shall we do? And they're like, oh no, I think I need a poo, or I'm off to my bedroom, or I've lost my dinosaur, or whatever it may be, and they're never to return, or you find them out in a scooter. So what they're doing is giving you clear messages that actually I don't associate what you're talking about with a very positive feeling, and therefore I'm going to try and distract you and me by going and doing something else.
Yeah.
So if we can try and reframe that a little bit and really work on those dispositions for learning. And also in my first 5 years we talk a lot about learning through play. So the play is a vehicle for learning, not the stuff that you do before and after. And again, if you can take loads of the ideas that we've got, and we've got hundreds if not thousands of activity ideas on our app that are all linked to development but all play-based. And therefore you find as a parent you spend way more time playing, but knowing that the play is not only developing your child in a load of areas, it's also developing their kind of journey towards those key skills.
Yeah, and in fact, our app is actually totally free at the moment on the App Store, just for a short period of time. And one of our new features, which I know parents absolutely love, is a mix of 6. And the idea being every single morning you can log on and you get a new 6 activity and interaction ideas that are linked to exactly where your child is in their personalised learning journey. So download it, give it a go. It's totally free, and those that download it at the moment, it's free for good.
Free for life.
Yeah, free for life, because we just want people right now to be using it, talking about it, and absolutely loving it. And it does literally guide you step by step through to all of these key skills with all the knowledge that we as a team of experts know about. Our half hour is up, believe it or not. In fact, it's more than up. Wow. So thank you for tuning in. As per usual, there's a downloadable free guide, and share that guide around, because we are trying to spread the word. And if granny and granddad or grandpa or whatever names we have for our families these days might benefit also from having a read about this approach, so that they can also support you in supporting your child, then let's spread the word. And finally, we have a really interesting live coming up next, and the team have come up with this name, which is Glitter and Unicorns, Dirt and Diggers, the Role of Gender in Play. And we've got a lot to say about that. Yeah,
that's going to be a really tight half hour to get that all in.
That is going to be a
Any questions you've got around kind of gender and how that manifests itself in your children and your children's play, send them in and we'll do our very best to answer them.
Now the next one's the 14th of June, just because of a few holidays getting in the way, but we'll be back to every other week after that. So we'll see you soon, and we've got to shimmy over to the screen and turn it off as per usual.
As per usual.
Are you doing it this time?
I'm going to do it this time. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.